we can all come back to our slides here. I think of all the workshops, mine today is in the most straightforward, and that's why it's nice that it's at the end of the day, and it's going to be relatively quick. The first question is, what is APA citation? And I know you all know what it is. It's a standardized way of referring to your sources. And APA stands for the American Psychological Association. It's primarily used in the social sciences subjects, and in MSOL, I believe you all need to use APA. So why do we cite? So we do this to acknowledge the work of other scholars. We also do so to distinguish our own ideas from others. And that's critical in all our academic writing, because we are working with sources, and it's key to make sure that we distinguish between not only our words, our words and the words of others, but our own ideas and the ideas of others. So this is not a workshop on paraphrasing and summarizing, but when we paraphrase or summarize a source, do we need to cite it? In other words, we're not using the words directly from the source. I see some people nodding their heads. Yes. So we need to cite, and we're going to just look concretely at what that is in just a moment, even when we're referring to some other person's ideas. Otherwise, it seems like they're our own words. So citation is how we acknowledge people's words and ideas, which are the kind of currency of the realm of academia. Professor Galvez talked about sort of the a little bit more about when she talked about the algorithms, why some scholars' work is privileged over others, and not necessarily because it's better, but just because the algorithm spits that out more often, and it becomes this cycle. It's like when we do the shoe shopping, right? But again, we're not going to think about that so much for this workshop. We just want to think about how to do it properly. And I think this is the main takeaway for this workshop, and this is the reason why my workshop can be relatively short. It's because we're not going to learn all those rules, and you don't need to memorize them. All I'm going to do is show you the key resources that you can use when you need to cite, and make sure that you're familiar with them. And you'll just need to know how to refer to them. Again, you don't need to memorize these things. There's not going to be a quiz at the end of this workshop or anything like that. And the more you write papers using APA citation, the more it will become familiar to you. So here's a question. Why do we need to learn APA at all? Like, why do we even need to have this workshop? Because as you might recall, there are citation tools available now that weren't available even just 10 years ago, right? So Professor Galvez showed us that Google Scholar site. Do you all remember that? Where, I'm going to put it in the chat here, if I can find it. So you can all go there, right? Do you remember this? So we went to Google Scholar, and someone suggested that we look up corporal punishment, right? And we saw that in that listing of sources, there's like a quotation mark, and by clicking on that quotation mark, we can see the source cited in all these different ways, which was really nifty, right? So, and then there's also these citation tools like RefWorks and EndNote, which I'm not going to be talking about today, which just make the process so much easier. It's a wonderful time to be a graduate student because so much is at your fingertips now. It really accelerates the process. Well, does anyone want to speculate? Like, why do we need this workshop? I'll answer the question because it's the end of the day, and so we need to do it. We need to become familiar with APA because these tools are actually not foolproof. In fact, they're far from foolproof. So I'm not going to go to that page right now on corporal punishment. And you're all looking at my slide right now, not that the page that's, so here's the, we remember this slide, right? And if you click on the quotation mark, then you see citation in all these different ways, right? So it's often not correct. So we just need to check check how things are cited whenever we use these tools. Often they're pretty far off, actually. It's just the volume of sources that have been entered into digital form. There are errors. Okay, so tools. The first place that I would recommend, oh, and I'm not sharing my, so I'm going to go back to my slideshow. All right, so are we all looking at a slide that says becoming familiar with APA? All right, great. So I'm going to put this link, if you just type apastyle.org, and I'd like everyone to just check it out right now. Bookmark this on your browser because this is a terrific resource, and it's coming from the horse's mouth, as the saying goes. It's APA from the APA organization. So this is a primary tool for learning APA, and there are even tutorials on this site, which you can check out. There's a book. How many of you have this book already? Some of you? Oh, okay. I see hands raising. Great. So I just ordered my copy. I actually didn't have the 7th edition, but so it's helpful to have the book. And the manual and the APA website are especially important when looking up things like how you format a manuscript, or how do I present data. So this is when you're producing that final version of your thesis. There are also how do I reduce bias in my language usage, because this is something that APA also covers. It's not only about citation. As an organization, APA sets standards for style, and I want you all to also check out the APA style and grammar guidelines, because I think this is a wonderful resource. And I'm going to put this in the chat so you can just check it out. So this is the section on bias-free language and what terms do we use to refer to different racial ethnic groups. And as an example, if you're writing about indigenous practices in water management, I just came up with that. How do you refer to the to different indigenous groups? Well, APA has standards for that, right? And you all probably know that these terms change over time. And the reason the APA has these new additions is that as an organization, the APA is making an effort not to be, stultified and stuck in using this terminology. It's trying to, and again, I'm thinking of Professor Galvez's talk, be progressive and oriented towards let's say justice in the language that it recommends as well, because we know that language matters. So there's a great site there, and what they happen to say about referring to indigenous groups is that you should use the preferred moniker of the group itself. So if you're, would not want to use like the global term. Those terms are often contested, right? So American Indian is no longer used. Native Americans is used in the United States. In Canada, it's First Nations. I mean, these things all have histories and preferred usages depending on the context. But the APA sets standards for that. But you would use the particular group like Sioux or Lakota. And I just wanted to pick out, show you another slide. So this is from that section that I shared just now on grammar guidelines. And this shows that APA's effort to address bias. And so that's the link. Oh, I'm sorry. Have you been seeing my links? I think I've been sending them privately to Jonathan. Oops. Oh, I've been sending all the links privately. See, this is this thing that happens with Zoom. Okay, so, oops, all my links have been sent.
It's okay. At the end of the presentation, if you want to share your presentation, we'll email it out to everyone so they'll have it as well.
Okay, right.
This is really good information, Lisa, because this stuff can be used after, and I'm so glad you're sharing this.
Okay, great. I hope it's helpful. So I took this example from the APA page on historical context, and they really have done a lot to update that page recently, which is heartening. So what do you do when you are referring to a source that is, say, an old source that is using biased language? How, if you quote from that source, right, and that source is using biased language, how do we acknowledge that that language is biased in a sort of a standardized way? And this slide I've taken is an example taken from the APA site that suggests how to do that. How do we show the historical context? So the quote is from a source written 32 years ago in 1988. And so it's referring to sort of so the language that's used sort of is gender biased. It seems to assume that only men are, in the discipline of psychology. So a footnote is used. So there's a asterisk and a footnote, and then in the footnote one says the term men in quotes conveys the person's intention to exclude women from the society. So that's something. This is more of a somewhat arcane, and this might not come up, but it's one of those questions. How do I quote a biased source? How do I acknowledge it? And that's the kind of thing you can look up on the APA site. Okay, so for the rest of the presentation, I'm going to be focusing more on nuts and bolts, and much of this I think will be review for you. But first, your one-stop shop nice page is the Lehman Library Citation Guide. And did you take a look at this in the previous presentation at all? With the wonderful librarians? I think you may not have seen this particular page.
No.
So this is a great, great. So this is a great one to bookmark because it pulls together multiple pages that are useful for citing whatever citation format you may use, whether it's APA, MLA, Chicago, or other styles. And this screen snip, I apologize, it's a little bit old, so you can see it has the 6th edition version of the APA manual, which has a blue cover. So that's something just to keep in mind. And I want us to go to one particular page on this site, which I think is especially wonderful. And it's the Trinity College Citation Guide. So if you click on that, oops, sorry. It's not the Lehman page, it's the Trinity College page. So go there. Oops, it started taking me to a different place. This is the page, I'm sorry. All right. So what we're going to do today is look at in-text citations and the reference page, because all citation formats are comprised of two main elements: the references to your source that you make in the body of your paper, and then a section at the end which lists all those sources in detail. The in-text citations are a streamlined way of referring to the sources. And depending on the discipline that you're in, different items are necessary in those in-text citations. So in MLA format, which you would use, for example, in a language and literature class, in your English class, you only, in your in-text citation, what's privileged is the author and just the author's name and page number, if you have a source, and if you're quoting from a particular page. For APA format, there's author, I'm typing in the chat, maybe there's year and page number if you are quoting from that page. So APA citation formats reinforce disciplinary values, and in the social sciences, the recency of a text when it was published is crucial. Whereas that's not the case in literature and languages. There's this idea of like the eternal literary text, and citations are often in the present tense, even if the person who wrote the text died many years ago. That's not the case in APA. As we'll see in just a moment, in-text citations in APA also, when we refer to that text in a narrative format, are in the past tense, because recency matters. The present is built on the research of the past. Okay, so actually, I'm going to go back to that Trinity College page in just a moment, but let's do a quick look right now at some examples of in-text citations. So, am I sharing my slides right now? You're looking at the slides? Okay, I want to just make sure.
In-text citations, what
Good.
is it?
Oh, great, okay. So the basic format for in-text citations in APA, the basic format consists of the last name of the author, no first name is used, the year of publication, and the page number with any quote. If you do a paraphrase as opposed to a quote, the page number is recommended, but it's not essential. And the in-text citation has a relationship with the references page, of course, which is alphabetized, so that if someone's reading your paper and they're really interested in what you're talking about, and they want to, they see a summary of a source, they want to track that source down, they can go to the references page. So here are some examples of in-text citations, and this must look very familiar to you at this point. So the basic format is parentheses, last name, comma, year. If you need to have the page number, then it would be after the year with a little p to indicate page. Often in the social sciences, we have co-authored papers, and when we have two authors, we use this ampersand to indicate the two authors, as opposed to writing out "and" followed by the year. And this is a sort of a tricky thing, which you probably won't come across very often, but sometimes we may have Marshall and Mandel may be authors who have written several papers in the same year, and we're using all of those papers. So we use a little sort of tagging system, a little A or a little B or C, to refer to which of those texts written in 2006 we're referring to. And the listing in the bibliography includes that. But that's a little bit more detailed than you need to know right now. And again, you do not need to memorize it. You just need to be familiar with the format so that it just feels familiar when you come across it, and you it's not you don't have the sense like, oh my gosh, this is so unfamiliar and I'm not sure what this means. So something that has become increasingly frequent and will no doubt become more and more frequent as time goes on is that there are much of the information that we get is on the internet. So it's on social media, right? And just because it's on social media doesn't mean that it's not a valuable text, or it's not a valuable source. Remember Professor Galvez's presentation, she emphasized that sometimes the scholarship that is reinforced and recycled over and over again in academia or in your subject area is quite stodgy. It's not cutting edge. Whereas what you can find on Twitter might really be incredibly meaningful and valuable and useful. So, so when you cite something off of social media that you find that might not have an author, that might not have a publication date, or it might be not have any page numbers, of course, you will not be able to follow this, this exact format, right? So it's actually pretty simple how you cite sources that are missing this information. And on the APA style page, that I shared with you, there's actually a page about that gives you a lot of detail about what to do when a source you have doesn't have any of this information. So this is just very quick. It's like a matrix that goes into great detail. When you don't have the author, you just refer to that source by the title. That's the title that's in the parentheses. If there's no publication date, you just refer to it as ND, which stands for, does anyone want to guess? No publication date? Okay, no date. I think I read someone's lips saying that. ND stands for not North Dakota, no date. If there are no page numbers, in some cases you can refer to it by the paragraph. So, so I think that's pretty straightforward. And just rest assured that there are there are one or two resources out there: the Lehman Library page, the APA style page, and I like this Trinity page that we'll look at more closely in a moment. And that information is at your fingertips. So. Okay, let's go to that Trinity College page now, because I really like this Trinity College site. Oh, and I see there was a question there from Jonna. Do any of the services offered to Lehman students through the library or other campus resources include reviewing our citations and bibliography? Yes. So I work at the Lehman Tutoring Center, Instructional Support Services Program, and you can make an appointment with a writing tutor. And I will share with you, when we send you materials after this, a handy one-page sheet with all the links that you need. It's all online, of course. So a writing tutor can go over that with you. Right.
Thanks.
Sure. All right, so let's go to, I'm going to now go to, and you can all do this on your own. Let's all navigate to that Trinity College page. And I'm going to put it in the chat again, because I want to show this to you. And I'm going to go there myself right now. All right. All right. So this page has been updated for the 7th edition, which is nice. And let's look at journal article, a journal article that you find in a library database, because that's a very common kind of site source that you'll find. Ooh, and we can even look at how you cite a tweet. Actually, let's do the tweet first. I'm really curious. Okay, here we go. How do you cite a tweet? All right, so each one of these pages on the, each one of these PDFs on the Trinity College page gives you a very nice breakdown here. The citation elements are given in order. It even gives a photograph of the source there. And then it shows you what this would look like in your references list first, right? So there it is. So when you cite a tweet, you actually provide the entire text of the tweet. Interesting. And then you provide the Twitter web URL. And they're also telling us here that if we're tweeting a person, the format is, okay, it looks like this in APA. So in APA, it's always just the last name, right, in your in-text citation. But in the references list, you give the last name followed by the initial of the first and middle, if that person, I think it's just the first actually, of that author. And so this is a difference from MLA where the full first name is given, and you can, but APA never includes the person's first name. And I think that that's has to do with APA's scrupulousness about trying to avoid bias, right? Because names, first names connote gender. And studies have shown that when people find out a researcher is not a man, that research tends to be sort of more devalued or thought of as lesser somehow. So it's just something to keep in mind. In your references list, when you list that source, you will give the last name followed by not the full first name, but just the initial, capitalized followed by a period. In your in-text citations, you don't have the initials or the first name. It's all last names, right? It's like the military, just referring to people by their last names. So the thing that I really like is that it gives you, really detailed guidance for each type of source that you might use. And in addition, not only does it give you the proper reference format, and one thing I want to point out here is that notice that this has a hanging indent. So the first line, when you have a references list, and we're going to look at a sample paper and look at the references list together in just a moment, it's all alphabetized and hanging indents are used. So if you're not sure how to do a hanging indent in Microsoft Word, that's something that you will just want to look up. I think it's in the paragraph menu. I use the shortcut Control-T. So I just highlight the whole paragraph and I just do Control-T to get the hanging indent. So that's just a little nut and bolt kind of thing there. So this is the thing I really wanted to show you, and that is that for the in-text citation, there are two ways to do an in-text citation. It's not always in parentheses like this, although that's the most common, right? Where you just see a sentence at the end of the sentence where you're referring to someone's idea, you have the parentheses, last name, comma, year. You can mix it up, and in fact, you should mix it up a little, and you should have not only parenthetical references, but also narrative references. And narrative references include, the author's, it refers to the author, it's like more like telling a story. So it's a signal phrase. That's the technical term. According to so-and-so, Athar tweeted, right? So there's a language of your own, subject and verb, introducing the source itself. And I see there that, okay, so maybe I was wrong because the first name is used. So maybe depending on the discipline, I think maybe psychology is very strict. It's okay to use first name. So you may see it in it sounds more journalistic. All right, so, okay. So how are we doing for time? All right, so we, 10 minutes. So I'm gonna, everybody still with me? All right, great. I'm going to go back here to tweet is less characteristic. You might never write a paper here where you include a tweet. but you will be citing journal articles and articles that you locate in a library database. So let's check this out. So is everyone now looking at the page for APA style when you cite a journal article from an online library database? Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, yeah. Great. So this, I said you don't need to memorize anything, and you definitely don't, but this is one citation format that you just want to be familiar with, because this is the most common. So once again, it gives us the crucial elements of the citation right at the top in the order that they're most important, and then the proper reference format. So again, this is how the item is listed in your references list at the end of your paper, where you give the full information for that source. So I'm going to make this a little bigger. So everyone just kind of look at this and process it. And I'm going to point a few things out. So it's last names, right? Only the first initial. That's interesting. It's missing the ampersand. I wonder if that's a feature of AP. I have to look that up because it's the new edition if they omitted the ampersand, but this is updated for the new edition of APA, so you can go by this. No ampersand to indicate and when you have two or more authors. But the thing that I think of as very counterintuitive is that the title of a journal article is in sentence case, not in title case, right? So sentence case is where you capitalize the start of the sentence and any proper nouns in the sentence, but everything else, the start of the word is in lowercase. To me, that looks weird because I was trained in MLA, but that's correct. And the journal article is more conforms to what we might expect, which is that the title of a journal or a book is italicized, and it's in title case where the important words are capitalized. And so then we have the volume and the issue number, looks like that. And this is a little thing to point out, but oddly notice that the volume number is in italics. So you might encounter a faculty member who is a stickler about that, but it's supposed to be in italics. I think I've heard the nursing department is if he cares about that. So, and then the page number. So the page numbers are without those P's. So, you know, there's no P in front of these page numbers in the references list. But weirdly, in APA, you have a little P in your in-text citation, right? If we're referring to a particular page. And that is just one of those things that you have to get used to. It seems inconsistent or strange. Okay, so, and I see a question, Dijon had, I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. What if you're quoting a primary source? How would you put that into APA format? Okay, so do you, is that like an interview, someone you interviewed?
Yes.
Okay. Let's hang on to that, because actually that's a great question. I don't know off the top of my head, because I actually, my research hasn't involved primary sources. My background is more in literature, and I'm citing texts. But that's a good one for us to practice our skills in looking things up, because everything is there. And so there's one thing I want to point out, which is, are you all familiar with this DOI? So when we cite something that came from a database, we must provide either the URL for the database, right, www, whatever, or this DOI, which stands for Digital Object Identifier. And that is when we find that see that arrow there pointing to the Digital Object Identifier? It's right there when we find it in the database. So we just take that information. If we are loading our sources as we find them into RefWorks or Zotero or Mendeley or one of those digital citation compilation sources, supports. There's a better word for that. It'll also take the DOI number, so you just can look it up in your database. Database, that's the word I want. Okay. So I'm going to stop this screen share, but bookmark this site because it's handy. And I think that I have not much time left, so I'm going to move along. What I'm going to cover next is we're just going to quickly references list. We've already looked at a sample and signal phrases, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the nuances of signal phrases, and then maybe we can, Dejan, try looking up how we would cite a primary source, meaning, let's say, someone that we interview. That's a great question. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again, go back to the slideshow. Here we go. So are you all looking at a slide that says references list? Okay, great. So we're on the same page. All right. Well, this was like a quiz show thing. There are several errors in this slide. This is a journal article downloaded from a database. And let's see, can you spot the errors? There are 5. And you can unmute yourself. Okay, yes. Eagle eyes there, Talia and Maria. Talia said that Faye, the first name is given. We only want the F, right? F period. Number 2, second, yep, the name. No capitals. So, yes. So, yes, Maria got it. There should be, actually, I believe this one is capitalized after the colon because it's like, it's sentence case. But the title of the article is in sentence case. So this is correct, but the T would be capitalized after the colon. Yep, Johnny got it. I think that's 2 so far. Ah, Maria is on fire. Yes, so the volume number is italicized. And one more. No DOI, Talia, you got it. Ah, Nikki, no, the year is missing. I always, every time I show this slide, when I've done this, I forget that one. And it's like the most important one. The year is missing, very good. So where should the year be? Right, it goes here. I'm gonna just make it up. But that's, it's a name date format. Year is critical. So that's huge, excellent. And then finally, no DOI. So, so there should be this DOI here, right? All right, you guys are great. That was very good. And you did that in like 2 minutes. Okay, so signal phrases. So signal phrases will enhance your writing greatly if you use them with care. So a signal phrase is the phrase that we use in our own writing to when we are referring to a source. So it serves to mark the boundary between your own words or ideas and the words or ideas of someone else in a much clearer way than if we didn't use it. And sometimes it's really needed. So here are some examples of signal phrases, right? And notice that the past tense is used in that signal phrase. Again, this is the expectation with APA, because something that was written previously is in the past. We're not in this eternal literary present, which the MLA uses. Typically, we use present tense when we use signal phrases in the MLA format, but not APA. So, so you could use either the past tense, so-and-so noted, or it might be present. It's still it's like the present perfect. It's has noted, but it's still indicating this took place previously. there are cases where you will use the present tense. So like if you're saying something like results show or researchers agree. And here are some helpful verbs, but there are, if you just Google signal phrases, you'll come across many very nice listings of signal phrases, often on Writing Center websites. And if you have a writing manual of some kind, like Diana Hacker's manual or the Little Seagull Handbook, which I recommend just as a kind of nice overview of just how to write well. It's there's a little section on integrating sources into your writing, and it includes signal phrases. So, all right, I think I have 2 minutes. So these are examples of signal phrases here, right? And the thing to keep in mind, oops, what's wrong there? This should be in past tense. The thing to keep in mind is that you want to select your verbs with care. And another thing is that notice that the subject and the verb are right next to each other. So this is just a guideline of powerful writing in general. If you have a lot of words in between your subject and your verb, it's harder to read. So this is a phrase, and the subject and the verb come right together. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to just look at an example of, oh, and I'm sorry. So the thing I wanted you to notice with this slide here is that both these ways of, these forms of in-text citation work. Remember, we looked at the Trinity College site, and it gave you examples of both. You'll use them, there's a different emphasis depending on which one you use. So if you have the parentheses at the end, which is classic, just giving the last name of the author in parentheses followed by the year, the author's name is de-emphasized and the idea itself is emphasized. If you use the signal phrase, it's emphasizing the author and their agency and making that argument, right? So if you tend to leave out the signal phrases, you can have paragraphs that are very blurry because the boundary between the information coming or the idea from that source and what you are saying, it just gets, the boundary becomes indistinct. So this is an example of a paragraph, and I got this from Diana Hacker's writer's reference of a blurry passage of example of academic writing. So it sort of goes on and on and on, and then only at the very end do we get the citation, right? And I've heard instructors complain about this and suggest that you know, this is a lot of students do this, and it's just not clear where these ideas came from. So using signal phrases is like practicing. Is a better practice in terms of academic integrity because it's more clearly marking those boundaries. So here's that same passage, including the signal phrase. And I'm going to, oops, excuse me, wrap up in just a moment. This is pretty much what I wanted you to see, but the signal phrase really will enhance your writing, and pay attention to signal phrases when you are reading articles, because you'll notice lots of verbs used that you can add to your arsenal. Okay, so so that is it. We don't have time. I guess we don't have time for the activity. Well, do we have 2 minutes? My clock says 3:43.
Yes, you absolutely do.
Okay, right.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So why don't we actually try to do this? So I would like to go back to the question that was posed. Dejan, had an excellent question here, and the question is, how do we cite a primary source? So why don't you try this right now? I'd like you to see if you can locate through the resources that I've shared with you. That's the apastyle.org site, the Lehman Library site. I'm not sure if I'm remembering that site. I'm sorry, I will find that site. But if you type Lehman Library Citation, it should come up. And the Trinity College site, which is actually, I believe it's listed on the Lehman Library site. The Lehman librarians have been shifting some of the sources that they recommend on that site for different reasons. One is that, for example, Purdue OWL has now started placing ads on its site, so they didn't want to have that site there. But so let's see if we can figure this out. And we have about a minute to do this, but we'll see how far we get. So, and I'm going to share my screen because I'm going to try to do this as well along with you.